Hi, everyone, and welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and the Singularity Podcast with our host, Gary, Lyon Otto. Gary, how are you?
Excellent.
It's just so fantastic. People who have been subscribed to the podcast, they can pick up the book. Again, the name of the book for our listeners and viewers is?
Singularity, Mankind's Search for Relevance.
Okay, and that Mankind's Search for Relevance is where I'm so into AI. Gary has given me this point where I'm getting scared now. I'm going to have to work 24/7, 7 days a week because we don't have much time. Has there ever been in humanity where we don't have much time to be able to survive? If what we're talking about with AI.
Survival is which way? Survival is more spiritually survive within ourselves or survive as a race. I don't see we're going away. I don't think there's any reason to eliminate the human race. That's the Terminator thing. So that's the survival.
So you end up on welfare or the haves and have-nots. Yeah. It's going to be such a larger gap soon.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's going to be a larger gap. And those who take advantage of AI are going to be the ones that have the advantage. That's one reason it's going to be almost impossible to stop the advance.
Let's talk about .com before we go to the workforce. I want to jump right really quickly. Anyone that started and jumped on .com first, yes, they became extraordinarily wealthy.
Yes. Yes.
Is AI or Web 3.0 the next com?
Don't know. It's going to be a situation where what are the entrepreneurs going to be? The entrepreneurs will be whatever is new and will bring all kinds of different kinds of industries into existence. We don't even know what those industries are. I think that we will find out that there are different ways for things to advance. And I think that's the question, and those are the intriguing aspects of AI. But the thing is, how does mankind interact with it? Yeah. And the thing is, it's a matter of what the intelligence gap is, and the gap's going to grow. That's part of it. Do they want us to support them? At first they do, because we have control over the mechanics of the world. We have control over all motion and everything else. But that will change. We have drones and everything else to show that they can exist without it. But I don't know. We're going to have an entirely different world. It's going to change things very, very quickly.
So let's talk about our topic, which I'm so excited about, adapting the workforce in education. I'm going to go to education first. This is a very interesting one because teachers have not been exposed enough to AI yet, especially K through 12 teachers. We're not talking college. College figured it out a little bit earlier based on studies, and especially in the sciences and STEM education and things like that. Adapting education, it's going to change. And I told you about memorization. You and I both were in the school, thought we had to learn to memorize everything in college. We had to memorize all our different things. And then there started being this push, we don't need to because of Google. You can find that information. There's no microfiche anymore. You don't have to memorize stuff. And you said that hurts us as a society without memorization.
It does and doesn't. I mean, I use Google all the time when I do my physics. I say, what's the current thought on this? And I can look it up. So I do use it. And I'm a terrible speller. I use it for those aspects.
Me too. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a horrible speller. It's really crazy, but I do a lot of all the stuff I do in writing. But the question is motivating us. How do we feel fulfilled? And the question, do we have to have artificial means to be fulfilled? If all our needs can be provided without doing anything, because they were provided by AI, if all our needs are being able to provide, how do we stay fulfilled? And that's a challenge that's huge. So I go through that and I think the people who have it in them will do it. They'll find a way. We can't all become painters or music and do our own music and write poetry and so forth. That's not enough.
No.
How many people have that capability and talent? But the thing is, how do we use our talents? Do we duplicate what AI can already do, just as redundantly do it? I don't know that. It could be a situation would be like that.
So we adapt education. First thing we need to adapt in education is we can meet every student. No longer do we have to have a factory type system of education. They've not pushed that yet, and this is another thing I'd like to consult in education is, hey, how I wanted to teach when I taught in the classroom for years, where I wanted to have individualized instruction for every student. Now that can be met.
They can. I could develop a software to teach math. They don't even teach math anymore. Everybody has a calculator, so they barely taught. They're not teaching cursive in a lot of places anymore. So you think about that, it's like, But I could do a software because I know how you have to have redundant repeating this. So you go back and if you had trouble with doing fractions, and so you go forward to the next topic and do equations here, and then you come back and do review with the person who had trouble with before until you finally ingrain it and make it part of their overall understanding. The point is, we don't even teach math anymore. As I said in the last podcast, we were 30th out of the top 70 countries in math because we don't need to, because everybody gets by without it. And that's a shame, because if the question really is thought in achieving, beating those challenges. If you learn something that you had to work real hard, remember the teachers. What do the teachers remember? Who do the teachers remember? You remember the easy teachers? No, you remember the person who busted your tail and you did everything you could to beat it. There was an old movie called Timothy Bottoms, I think was the actor. It was Paper Chase. It was about a student going to Harvard, and John Houseman was a professor in contracts. And he was brutal. He was incredibly difficult. So the guy, his whole experience at Harvard was to get into the mind of Houseman and beat him. I had a history teacher, history of American foreign policy. The guy was fascinating. He'd get up there in front of the people, and he would have the class, the nightmare class. He had 11:30 on a Saturday class, and you go there, and about 30% of the people there were taking the course. The other ones just came to listen to him. He'd write 4 things on the blackboard. And he'd talk about the people who directed foreign policy, like Woodrow Wilson. You got to know who Woodrow Wilson was, and you realized John Foster Dulles, what kind of decisions he would make. Now that whole discovery process made that the most interesting course I had at school. How do you keep that in excitement and learning and pushing? That's the human soul. That's the human. Me, I write all this stuff. I have ideas. I'm writing a book on climate after I'm done with the physics books. And then I know what I'm going to do. I already have it. It's going to be a little bit big and a little bit much of a tome. I'm going to go start at the beginning of the Earth and going through the climate all the way through, because it's interesting. And I see a lot of misstatements and misunderstandings, and I'm trying to, and I want to resolve it, but I want to resolve it intelligently. So I have health issues, and I just wrote up something about an issue that I have, all these repeated surgeries I get. And I wrote this thing up, and I'm going to submit it to New England Journal of Medicine. They're not going to publish it because it's a case study. They don't publish case studies, but that's how I do it. But that to me is...
That's something the AI can't do.
I'm intrigued. I'm 74 years old, and I don't have enough moments in the...
So AI can't do that.
They can't do that. It's the excitement of going to the next thing. How do we keep people excited? How do we make...
Because AI is going to... So this is an example. You ask ChatGPT a specific thing. What are best practices? It's boring as heck. It's terrible. It's awful. Then you say, hey, out of box. You see these amazing things. You're like, wow, I never would have thought of that idea. The first layer of AI is terrible. Second layer, not great. Then it gets better and better and better when you ask the right questions. As a human being, we all have our talents, and we use these talents in a way that develops, that makes it intriguing. What you said, this is what keeps you up at night. This is what keeps you excited to try to do these things.
So there'll be those who can cooperate with AI, and they're going to get involved with, they actually say, have you thought about this aspect? Now, we understand humanity's got these problems, but have you thought about how dealing with these negatives of humanity actually advances understanding, your understanding and so forth? How do you keep people interested? You actually say that. The last thing you want, they had in the movie Matrix, which I thought was another great movie. And the premise was ridiculous. They have these bodies that they use the brains for.
Yeah.
Energy.
So I guess that's the only one that robots been completely control is the Matrix.
Exactly. But the thing is, you have these people, and they did an experiment where they had the humans where they made everything was idyllic for humans. Everybody was happy and everything else. But they found out that failed. And it failed miserably. And so what they did is they had conflict in human life just like we do in real life. They were artificial lives, but they had this conflict in life. So they needed the conflict. They needed the challenge to make that story, make it so they got whatever they needed out of these bodies. The premise was terrible, but the story was fascinating, how they presented it. So the Matrix, they needed the conflict of the humanity that they had to deal with challenges. That's the question. Do they create artificial challenges for us? They're going to need to do that. Or do we have... And
can they survive if they try to do the Matrix with us?
Yeah.
Could they survive? Could artificial intelligence even find a purpose, especially when they grow to a certain point, to even figure out that it's without humans. It's like having a dog or a cat. Am I going to not want to live with that dog and cat anymore and have no interaction with anything?
Well, is it more like the zoos versus free reign kind of concept? We like to have more natural environments for our large zoos that the animals, but you still don't have the competition where they struggle to survive.
Right.
And they're dealing with a drought and so forth. But the thing is, do they do that with humanity, or do they create the challenges, or do we just have to create
Exactly.
our own? I don't know. I assume that they would do a positive structure somehow, that they would try to make it so it's a positive thing, but at the same time.
Right. So if we talk about adaptation in the workforce really quickly, because we are running out of time in this podcast, this could be a 2-podcast episode. We'll have to go in deeper into this, because I think this is such an important thing for people to look at now, right?
Yes.
They need to look at this now, because the adaptation of the workforce and education is the beginning process of transition. Once the workforce is different and the education system is different because of AI, how do we respond? How do we make these changes? In the workforce, we're going to see less and less monotonous tasks being done by human beings.
Exactly. But if you don't have to struggle in any way, what happens is you get conflict. That's what happens in some inner city neighborhoods. What do? You end up with conflict. And because the human soul needs to grow. And if you can't get it from good choices, making good decisions, and taking on challenges in that way, challenges come to you through mental illness, drugs, drinking, conflict with others. So the soul needs to grow. You can't vegetate. The human soul, we would just rot if we didn't. That's really what it comes down to, and that we are going to be front and center. In history, people always lived hand to mouth. I mean, you had to work to even feed yourself. So there was no choice. You had to come up to. But now you have more and more leisure time and more leisure time, and finally you get to the point where you don't have too much leisure time. But anyway, I think we covered.
All right, so that great episode. Best place is GaryLyonAuto.com. Your books will be all available there, these books as well, and these are very interesting. We'll go deeper. I know you have a series of podcasts on that, but at one point I want to talk about that. And you can pick up Singularity right now, available on Amazon. Appreciate it, Gary.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, that was the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and the Singularity Podcast, guys. Take care.